record. Okay, so good morning, everyone. If you're watching the recording, this is Bible class November 21st, and we're in the midst of chapter 14. We're about to start verse 36, but I want to read from the beginning of the chapter just so that we recall what we're up to, because this is a very long chapter, lots of things going on. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I'm actually going to read the chapter in alter to with his translation. So I'm just reading from page 311 in Ancient Israel. And when the day came round, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to the lad bearing his armor, "Come, let's cross over to the Philistine garrison, which is on the other side there." But his father he did not tell. And Saul was sitting at the outskirts of Giv'ah, under the pomegranate tree, which is at Migron, and the troops that were with him were about 600 men. And Achiah, son of Achituv, brother of Ikavod, son of Pinchas, son of Eli, priest of the Lord at Shiloh, was bearer of the ephod, and the troops did not know that Jonathan had gone. And in the pass through which Jonathan sought to cross over to the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag on one side and on the other side, and the name of the one was Bodsates, and the name of the other Seneh. The one crag loomed to the north facing Michmash, and the other to the south facing Giv'ah. And Jonathan said to the lad bearing his armor, "Come, let's cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will act for us, for nothing holds the Lord back from rescue, whether by many or by few." And his armor bearer said to him, Do you whatever your heart inclines. Here I am with you, my heart as yours." And Jonathan said, "Look, we're about to cross over to the men, and we shall be exposed to them. If thus they say, 'Stand still until we get to you,' we shall stand where we are and not go up to them. And if thus they say, 'Come up to us,' we shall go up, for the Lord will have given them in our hand, and that will be the sign for us." And the two of them were exposed to the Philistine garrison, and the Philistines said, "Look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they've been hiding." And the men of the garrison spoke out to Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come to us, and we'll teach you something." And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up behind me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." And Jonathan climbed up on his hands and knees with his armor bearer behind him, and they fell before Jonathan with his armor bearer, finishing them off behind him. And the first toll of dead that Jonathan with his armor bearer struck down was about 20 men with arrows and rocks of the field. And terror shook the camp in the field, and all the troops. The garrison and the raiding party were also shaken, and the earth trembled, and it became dire terror. And the lookouts attached to Saul at Givat Benjamin saw, and look, the multitude was melting away and going off yonder. And Saul said to the troops who were with him, "Call the roll, pray, and see who has gone from us." And they called the roll, and look, Jonathan and his armor bearer were absent. And Saul said to Achiah, "Bring forth the ephod." For on that day he was bearing the ephod before the Israelites. And it happened that as Saul was speaking to the priest, the tumult in the Philistine camp was growing greater and greater. And Saul said to the priest, "Pull back your hand." And Saul and all the troops who were with him rallied and entered into the fighting. And look, every man's sword was against his fellow, a very great panic. And there were Hebrews who were previously with the Philistines, who had come up with them into the camp, and they too turned round to be with Israel under Saul and Jonathan. And all the men of Israel who were hiding out in the high country of Ephraim had heard that the Philistines were fleeing, and they too gave chase after them in the fighting. And the Lord delivered Israel on that day. And the fighting moved on past Beit Aven, and the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day. And Israel made the troops take an oath, saying, "Cursed be the man who eats food until evening, until I take vengeance upon my enemies." And all the troops tasted no food. And the whole country came into the forest, and there was honey on the ground. And the troops entered the forest, and look, there was a flow of honey. But none touched his hand to his mouth, for the troops feared the vow. But Jonathan had not heard when his father made the troops swear, and he reached with the tip of the staff that was in his hand, and dipped it into the honeycomb, and brought his hand back to his mouth, and his eyes lit up. And a man from the troops spoke up and said, Your father made the troops solemnly swear, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food today. And so the troops were famished. And Jonathan said, My father has stirred up trouble for the land. Okay, so I think this is a key line in this chapter because the whole focus of the book of Samuel is about David and focusing on Saul being a bad choice. So here is a verse, Jonathan, his own son, saying, My father has stirred up trouble for the land. See, pray that my eyes have lit up because I tasted a bit of this honey. How much better still if the troops had really eaten today from the booty of their enemies that they found, for then the toll of Philistines would have been all the greater. So Jonathan, arguing against his father, saying that everybody should have eaten. And they struck down the Philistines on that day from Michmash to Ayalon, and the troops were very famished. And the troops pounced on the booty and took sheep and cattle and calves and slaughtered them on the ground. And the troops ate them together with the blood. And they told Saul, saying, Look, the troops are offending the Lord by eating together with the blood. And he said, You have acted treacherously. Roll a big stone over to me now. And Saul said, Spread out among the troops and say to them, Every man bring forth to me his ox and his sheep and slaughter them here and eat. And you shall not offend the Lord by eating together with the blood. And all the troops brought forth each man what he had in hand that night, and they slaughtered it there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar he built to the Lord. Okay, so that's where we left off. This very unusual kind of description of what's going on aside from the fight against the Philistines, but also this perhaps power play between Saul and Jonathan, this idea of what's happening with the troops and whether they should be eating or not. And when they did eat, they're eating meat with the blood. And how are the people atoning for eating the meat with the blood? So now we pick up at verse 36. We'll see if we can finish the chapter today, because there are 52 sentences in this chapter. Okay, so we're on page 82. Vayomer Shaul, Nerda acharei Filishtim laila, venavoza vahem ad or haboker, velo nasher bahem ish, vayomru, kol hatov be'enecha aseh, vayomer hakohen, nikrava halom el ha'elohim. So Saul said, let's go down after the Philistines tonight and spoil them until the light of the morning. That, in other words, we'll attack them tonight and take things from them. And we won't leave a man behind. Right, in other words, we'll kill all of them. And they said, as whatever is good in your eyes, do. That is, in other words, we'll do what you say. And then there's the asterisk there to point out that there's a space in the verse. In other words, how it was the accepted the accepted writing of the text of the book of Samuel has a space here. So that's just what the asterisk is pointing out, that the traditional writing manuscripts of the book of Samuel has a space here. So we'll see if the commentary points out anything about that. And the Kohen said, let's gather together here to God. 37, Vayish'al Shaul be'Elohim, ha'ered acharei Philishtim, hatitnem biyad Yisrael, velo anahu bayom hahu. So Saul asked God, should I go down after the Philistines? Will they be given into the hand of Israel? And he was not answered on that day. So I'm saying he was not answered. And the English translation says that God answered him not. It's the same thing, that God, he was not answered by God on that day. So, 38, Vayomer Shaul, Goshu Halom, Kol Pinot Ha'am, Ude'u Ure'u, Bama Hayata Hachataat Hazot Hayom. So, Saul said, gather, approach here all, now I would translate this, all the corners of the people, but it's translated as chiefs of the people. So let me just see what, and Alter translates it the same way. So I'm not familiar with the word pina. I am familiar with the word pina, meaning corner, but I'm not familiar with the word pina, meaning chief. It's like the only time that I'm familiar with so far that word is used to describe a chief. It could be nasi, it could be shotrim, it could be alufim. Those words we've seen before in the Torah, in the Bible up until this point. But pina, to be a chief, I'm just pointing that out, that it's an unusual word. So he asks the chiefs of the people to approach and to know and to see what was the sin of the people. What was this sin today? In other words, what caused God not to answer me reaching out to God? Like, there must have been something wrong. So 39, Ki Chai Adonai Hamoshia et Israel, Ki im yeshno b'Yonatan b'ni, ki mot yamut, ve'ein onehu mikol ha'am. So as God lives, the Savior of Israel, if it's because of Jonathan, my son, then he shall surely die. And but nobody among the people answered. So in other words, by bringing the chiefs of the people forward to try to figure out why God wasn't answering and to think maybe there's a sin among the people. Saul thinks it might be Jonathan's fault, and nobody is speaking up to say about what we've already seen, that Jonathan ate honey and none of the people ate honey, that Jonathan is the one with his arms bearer who started the whole thing against the Philistines without Saul being aware. So there are two things that Jonathan did that Saul wasn't aware of, and he thinks that it's his son's fault. So verse 40, Vayomer el kol Yisrael, Atem tihiyu le'ever echad, va'ani v'Yonatan b'ni nihiyeh le'ever echad, vayomru ha'am el Shaul, hatov be'enecha aseh. So he said to all of Israel, you will be on one side, and me and Jonathan, my son, will be on the other side. And all the people said to Saul, whatever is good in your eyes, do. So let's stop there and look at the commentary for 36 to 40. If we go to the bottom of 82, draw near hither unto God to ascertain God's will in the matter through the sacred oracle, the Urim and the Tumim. Asked counsel of God, literally asked of God, the same verb as in chapter 10. Answered him not. There must have been more to the procedure of consultation by Urim and Tumim than the simple matter of drawing one of two objects, one of which gave a positive and the other a negative answer to the question put. If that had been all, it is impossible to see how an answer could be withheld. So it doesn't say in the text that the Urim and Tumim were consulted. This is the commentary suggesting that if you're going to ask God a question, then it has to be through the Urim and Tumim. So that's the rabbis helping us understand how this question was asked of God. 38, wherein the sin has been. Saul takes it for granted that a sin must have made God withhold his answer, but his words do not suggest, as some commentators assume, that he at once concludes that there had been a breach of his vow. Note that Saul asked Jonathan what he had done, and we haven't gotten there yet. That's in verse 43. He shall surely die, another impetuous vow on the part of Saul. Okay, so let's see what Alter says here, below the line on 317, beginning with verse 37. And Saul inquired of God, and he did not answer him. Although it was extremely common for military leaders everywhere in the ancient Near East to consult an oracle before going into battle, Saul's failed inquiry here participates in a larger pattern in his story. He is constantly seeking knowledge of what is about to happen, as in his quest for a seer to help him locate the asses at the very beginning, but this knowledge is repeatedly withheld from him. Wherein is this offense? Saul assumes that the oracle did not respond because someone among his troops committed some offense. The narrator does not necessarily endorse this assumption. On page 318, were it in Jonathan my son? It refers to the just mentioned offense. Is this a flourish of rhetorical emphasis? Or, as J.P. Fackelman has suggested, does it open the possibility that Saul has Jonathan in mind? In the immediately preceding episode, after all, Jonathan has gone out on a military operation without permission. Jonathan now is brought forth as the possible perpetrator of some further not yet specified offense, which will prove to be the tasting of the honey. In any case, there seems to be some deep ambivalence between father and son well before the appearance of David at court. Okay, so let's continue in the Hebrew. Vayomer Shaul El Adonai Elohei Yisrael Hava Tamim Vayilached Yonatan V'Shaul V'Ha'am Vayilached Yonatan V'Shaul V'Ha'am Yatsa'u. So Saul said to God, the God of Israel, Hava Tamim, which is translated here as declare the right. And Alter says, no, Alter doesn't, Alter translates it differently, which is interesting. Yeah, that's just very interesting. I'm not sure where Alter is getting his English translation from. Alter says, well, our translation says, therefore Saul said unto the Lord, the God of Israel, declare the right. Hava Tamim is translated here as declare the right. And Jonathan and Saul were taken by Lot. So the word vayilached is translated as taken by Lot. But the people escaped. Now, Alter translates it as, and Saul said, Lord God of Israel, why did you not answer your servant today? So that's missing here. If there is guilt in me or in Jonathan, my son, O Lord God of Israel, show Urim, and if it is in your people Israel, show Tumim. Where is this all taken from? And the lot fell on Jonathan and Saul, and the troops came out clear. Now that's part of our verse. So Alter adds lots of things. So now I just have to, let's look at Alter's commentary here on 3:18. Lord God of Israel, why did you not answer your servant today? If there is guilt in me or in Jonathan, my son, show Urim, and if it's in your people Israel, show Tumim. This version comes from the Septuagint. The Masoretic text here has the short and cryptic show Tamim. Okay, so it is Hava Tamim, which is our translation has declare the right, which is just unusual Hebrew phrasing. So Alter thinks Hava Tamim should be read Hava Tumim. So under the letter Tuf of the word Tamim, it should, instead of a kamatz, the T vowel, it should be a kubutz, which is the three dots in a diagonal line. So it's still spelled the same way, Taf Mem Yud Mem, but with that different vowel under the letter Taf, it becomes Tumim instead of Tamim. So Hava Tumim would mean bring forth the Tumim, or show the Tumim, which could have led the Septuagint to add more words here. So Alter goes on, Saul's frustrated reference to his failure to receive an answer from the oracle makes a great deal of narrative sense. The Septuagint version also makes intelligible the process of oracular lottery. The Urim and Tumim were two divinatory objects attached to the ephod, probably in a special compartment. They may have been in the form of stones or tokens with lettering on them. Like the Torah describes it, or no, the Torah mentions that there should be Urim and Tumim, but the Torah doesn't describe what they're made of, where they're kept, or anything like that. They provided indication of binary oppositions. Thus, the question addressed to the oracle had to take the form of yes or no, X or Y. The opposition may have been underscored by the fact that Urim and Tumim begin, respectively, with the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. More speculatively, Urim might be linked with arur, to curse, and Tumim with the root taf memem, whole or innocent. Okay, well, whatever it is, Urim and Tumim also is part of the seal, either for Harvard or for Yale. I don't remember which one, but if you look up, Google, what is the seal of Harvard or Yale, you'll see that Urim and Tumim is listed there. In other words, Urim and Tumim is supposed to provide truth. And I guess studying at Harvard or Yale will, the process of studying will provide truth. Okay, so whatever it is, yes?
It sounds like the modern equivalent is the Magic 8 Ball.
Right, it's kind of like the Magic 8 Ball, and we're not supposed to think, though it's hard not to, that this is this Jewish oracle is magic. We're not supposed to think that. It's a mechanism to draw God's word. In other words, It's a mechanism to bring communication from God to life. Okay? So there are prophets who experience communication with God. There's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, and Joshua who experience communication with God. But how they experience that communication is different for each of them. The Urim and Tumim become a more public, it's a public exhibit of the communication. So in other words, there might be an answer that somebody might hear, but the Urim and Tumim, it's like somebody writes on a chalkboard or on a whiteboard, something like that. So miraculously, an answer appears. So it looks like magic, but it's not supposed to be magic. So somehow Saul is involving his son Jonathan in this. Like we're gonna divide all the people of Israel, and then me and my son, and that's how I want this answer to come forward by lot. So that's verse 41. 42. Vayomer Shaul hapilu beini uvein Yonatan beni vayilached Yonatan. Okay, so the first lot falls on Saul and Jonathan. Now in verse 42, Saul says, now let's make the lot fall between me and between my son Jonathan, and the lot fell on Jonathan. Okay, 43, Vayomer Shaul el Yonatan, Hagida li ma'asita, Vayaged lo Yonatan, Vayomer ta'amti biktsei hamateh asher biyadi ma'at devash hinani amut. Saul said to Jonathan, tell me, what did you do? And Jonathan told him and said, I surely tasted with the end of my staff that was in my hand a little bit of honey. Therefore, I am ready to die. He said, well, it's translated here, I will die. I think better translated, I'm ready to die. 44, Vayomer Shaul, Ko Ya'aseh Elohim, V'cho Yosef, Kimot Tamut Yonatan. And Saul said, God will surely do this, and more also, you will surely die, Jonathan. 45, Vayomer Ha'am el Shaul, Ha-Yonatan Yamut, Asher Asa, Ha-Yeshua HaGedolah Hazot BeYisrael, Chalila, Chai Adonai, Im Yipol, Misa'arat Rosho Arza, Ki Im Elohim Asa Hayom Hazeh, Vayifdu Ha'am et Yonatan, Velo Mate. So the people said to Saul, should Jonathan die for what he did? Rather, a great salvation, this great salvation of Israel. I think it should be translated, should Jonathan die for the great salvation that came to Israel? That, in other words, it's because of Jonathan that everything happened for good with the defeat of the Philistines. Chalila, far be it from the living God if even one hair of his head should fall to the ground, because he was acting with God today. So that's what the people said. He was acting with God. So, in other words, the people of Israel were praying on behalf of Saul, how could God do this? How could Saul die? How could Jonathan die? Oh, look at all the great things that Jonathan did with God. He wasn't acting against God, he was acting with God. And the people saved or rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. So this is amazing. So I just want to point out how amazing this is. We're familiar in the Torah about Moses praying to God to save the people of Israel from their sin with the golden calf, or their sin of listening to the 10 scouts and not listening to Joshua and Caleb. Lots of times in the Torah, Moses is praying on the people's behalf to save them. And now the people are praying to God to save Jonathan from the king. So I don't think we've seen something like that before in the Bible, that the people pray to God. From everything before and everything after, it's people, it's individuals praying to God to save the people of Israel. And here the people of Israel are praying to God to save Jonathan. So I think it's fascinating. And then verse 46, Vaya'al Shaul me'acharei plishtim, uflishtim halchu limakomam. Saul went up from after the Philistines. That is, I guess he stopped chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines went back to their place, or meaning the Philistines went back home. Okay, so let's look at the commentary here on these verses, beginning with 41 on the bottom of 83. Declare the right or give a perfect lot. Escaped literally went out. The verb is used in its legal connotation of went free. Tell me, so also Joshua appealed to Achan to confess after the lot had fixed upon him as the offender, back in Joshua 7. There was a natural reluctance to rely on the lot alone in a matter the penalty of which was death. Here am I will die. Jonathan does not remonstrate with his father or complain that his oath had been rash and the breach of it unwitting. Out of filial piety and loyalty to the monarch, he accepts his fate with noble resignation. Everything that is reported of Jonathan in the few years of his life which are recorded in the Bible is instinct with a rare nobility and generosity of character. 44, thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. One cannot withhold sympathy from Saul. It must have been with a heavy heart that he pronounced sentence on Jonathan, yet after his oath he could not do otherwise. Only the sound common sense of the people prevents a great tragedy. 46, went up from following the nervous crisis which he had undergone, must have left him prostrate and without heart for further fighting.
Rabbi?
Yes, Dov.
When they talk about lot, by the lot, are they talking about the Urim and
It's unclear. It's unclear. The rabbis and the medieval commentators think that that's what is meant by the lot, that it's the Urim and Tumim, but it's unclear. Because we have an example of lots that are drawn before, like how the land of Israel is to be divided among all the tribes. Each name of a tribe is drawn by lot. So we have that example. So it's unclear why the rabbis think it's Urim and Tumim. I don't know, but it could be because the Kohen is involved in this story in some way, right? Where we're told that Ichavod is there with Saul. So perhaps that's the reason the rabbis think that the lottery must be the Urim and Tumim, because the high priest is the one who held the Urim and Tumim on his garment.
Okay, as opposed to drawing the short straw.
Right. It's really unclear.
Okay.
Okay, so altar on these verses on the bottom of 318, cast between me and Jonathan. Since the Urim and Tumim can provide only binary responses, it's necessary to divide again into two alternatives in order to get an answer. Now, for altar, it's Urim and Tumim because the Septuagint's version of this has Urim and Tumim. Okay, so, but the Septuagint is from about 2,000 years ago, around the time of the rabbis. So the origin of the Septuagint, I mean, there's a legend of how the Septuagint is written, but it's really unclear. No, I shouldn't say that. It's unclear to me. There might be definitive scholarly answer to who wrote the Septuagint and when it was written, etc. But I'm not up on Septuagint scholarship, only to know it was written at the time of the rabbis. So was the Septuagint translating based on another version of the book of Samuel? Or was the Septuagint adding a comment itself into the text to try to make that comment a part of the definitive text? So we don't know. Okay, so on 319:43, indeed tasted a bit of honey. Jonathan begins by clearly and emphatically admitting responsibility, using the infinitive absolute followed by the verb, literally, taste, I have tasted. But he chooses with precision the minimal verb taste rather than eat, and holds back its minimal object, a bit of honey, for the very end of the sentence. And the troops said to Saul, will Jonathan die? As several commentators have observed, this is a precise reversal of the incident after Saul's victory over Nahash, in which the troops sought to kill dissidents and Saul saved their lives. Now he has become the severe autocrat, and his son's well-earned popularity with the troops saves the prince. Okay, so now let's see if we can finish the chapter in the time that we have left. V'Shaul lachad hamlucha al Yisrael, vayilachem saviv b'chol oivav, b'Moav, uvivnei Ammon, uve'Edom, uve'malchei Tzova, uve'Plishtim, uvechol asher yifneh Yarshia. So Saul took over the kingdom of Israel, and he fought all around against his enemies, against Moab, against the Ammonites, the Edomites, and the kings of Tzova, and against the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he put to them the worse. That is, he was victorious. 48, Vayas, let me just see how he translates that. Wherever he turned, he would inflict punishment. That's how Alter translates this. Vayas Chayil, Vayach et Amalek, Vayatzel et Yisrael miyad shosehu. And he did valiantly and smote the Amalekites and saved Israel out of the hands that spoiled them. Now, by the way, the next chapter, 15, is going to be a description of the defeat of the Amalekites. Okay, so it's just interesting that here it just summarizes and says he defeated the Amalekites. So why do we need chapter 15, a few verses later, to focus on that? Just interesting. Well, we'll talk about that when we get there. 49, Vayihiyu b'nei Shaul, Yonatan, V'yishvi, Umalki Shua, V'shem shtei venotav, Shem habechira Merav, V'shem haketana Michal. So the children of Saul were Jonathan and Ishvi and Malchishua. This is his sons. And the names of his two daughters, the older one is Merav, and the younger one is Michal. Now, we need to know the names of the daughters because King David marries one of them. Okay? And the other one appears in a story too. And it just so happens Merav and Michal are very common names in Israel today and among Jews around the world. Well, Merav not so much, but in Israel it is. But Michal, I mean, one of my own daughter's middle name is Michal, which is the feminine equivalent of Michael. Okay, so it's like a shorter version of Michael, who is like God. I'm just pointing out it's a common name, as opposed to Yishvi and Malchishua, not so much. Okay, 50. V'shem eshet Shaul Achinoam bat Achimaatz. V'shem sar tzva'o Aviner ben Ner dod Shaul. The Saul's wife is Achinoam, a famous singer, by the way, a popular Israeli singer from a few years ago, is Achinoam, the daughter of Achimaatz, and the name of the chief of staff or the head of his army was Aviner, son of Ner, Saul's uncle. 51, V'kish, Avi Shaul, V'ner, Avi Avner, ben Aviel. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Avner, was the son of Aviel. Vatehi hamilchama chazaka al plishtim kol yemei Shaul, v'ra'a Shaul kol ish gibor v'chol ben chayil v'ya'asfehu elav. The war was great, or it was a hard war against the Philistines all of the days of Saul, and Saul looked for almighty people, and then, like, in other words, he looked around the country or Israelite population for strong, valiant men, and he would gather them to him. Okay, so let's look at the commentary on these verses from 47, the right-hand column on 84. This summary of Saul's campaigns might have come more naturally at the conclusion of the account of his reign, but it's the not uncommon practice of the biblical historian to interpret his narrative of the main happenings with such summaries of events or facts. So see 2 Samuel 8 and 20. Took the kingdom, affirmed his worth as king by his resolute prosecution of wars. The verb is literally conquered, which Ehrlich takes to mean that he overcame the opposition to his kingship as related in chapter 10, 27. Moab, that might make more sense, like he ensured that he wasn't popular now, like the people of Israel overturned his vow, so he might think that maybe the people of Israel are against him. So the fact that Saul took the kingdom over Israel, he ensured that he stayed king. Moab, the territory lay immediately to the east of the Dead Sea. 85, Ammon, see chapter 11. Edom occupied the territory stretching southward from the Dead Sea to the Gulf of Eilat. Sova, a Syrian kingdom in the Lebanon region north of Israel. The Amalekites, this campaign is recorded at length in the next chapter. Ishvi, elsewhere in chapter 31 and also 1 Chronicles, 4 sons of Saul's are enumerated: Jonathan, Avinadav, Malchishua, and Ishbaal or Ishboshet. Ishvi is nowhere mentioned. All right, so that's going to be interesting when we get to chapter 31, that we're going to have different names for Saul's children. Kimchi suggests that Ishvi is a second name for Avinadav, an identification which is found in Josephus. He had 3 sons, Jonathan, Ishwi, and Melchishua, but Mitsudat David holds that Ishboshet is intended, and so most modern scholars. Avner, here the Hebrew form is Aviner. Saul's uncle, the words might refer either to Avner or to Ner, but as the father of both Ner and Kish was Aviel, it's clear that Kish and Ner were brothers, and therefore that Saul and Avner were cousins. This relationship is accepted by Josephus and all commentators in spite of the genealogy of 1 Chronicles 8, which makes Ner the father of Kish. Jewish commentators explain the discrepancy by treating Ner as a second name for Aviel. All right, so just pointing out, the commentary is pointing out the difficulty of the Hebrew in figuring out who's who. He took him unto him to serve in his standing army. Okay, so let's look at the ancient Israel on these last sentences. Back to 3:19:47. Saul had taken hold of the kingship. The verb used, lakad, is the same one just invoked for the process of being caught, trapped, taken hold of in the divine lottery. Saul himself was caught for kingship. Now, through conquest, he catches or secures the kingship. There is thus surely an undertone of ambiguity in this report of his success as monarch. He would inflict punishment. The Hebrew yarshia usually means to condemn someone as guilty in a court of justice. But a related idiom, to do justice, asot shefatim, also means to carry out punitive acts against an enemy. The Masoretic version is to be preferred to the Septuagint's Yoshia, which he would rescue, because in this narrative, God, not Saul, is represented as the rescuer. Apparently, the implication is that he carried out punishing expeditions against Israel's enemies to the east of the Jordan without actually conquering them, as David was to do. 3:20, and Saul's sons. This entire notice of Saul's family and of his conquests is placed as a formal marker of conclusion to the body of the Saul story. What follows is the episode that will definitively disqualify him for the throne in Samuel's eyes, and then David will enter the scene. The episode in which Saul pronounces a death sentence on his son and heir heralds the climactic encounter with Samuel over Amalek, in which the prophet will pronounce the end of Saul's incipient dynasty. Eventually, Saul and Jonathan, the parties jointly indicated by the first cast of the Urim, will perish in battle on the same day. Aviner, a variant vocalization of Avner.
If I could,
Yes?
how about just to make another modern analogy for those of you who are into Wicked, it reminds me of Glinda and Galinda. If you've seen it, you'll know what I mean.
Okay, yes. Okay. Avner, a variant vocalization of Avner. And the fighting against the Philistines, Saul has greater success on the eastern front, but he's unable to subdue the Philistines. In the end, they will destroy him in their victory at Gilboa. When Saul saw any warrior, he would gather him to himself. This report of constant military conscription indicates the institutionalization of the monarchy, and also accords with Samuel's warning about the burden of conscription that the king would impose. Okay, so Alter is just helping us understand just the relationship of these verses to the greater story and how they foreshadow Saul's impending doom. So we'll stop here for today. And the question remains, a few people answered that they are available next Friday, which is the day after Thanksgiving. So Can I just have a show of hands of those who are on now, if you're able to come on to class next Friday at 9:30? Okay, so I guess we will have class next week. So have a good rest of the day, everybody. Shabbat Shalom and happy Thanksgiving too. Take care.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.